I am just glad that you are willing to try something new with me today. So, what I'm doing is this month, I thought it would be really fun to interview people that I love and admire and to talk about things like persevering through hard things and waiting on God. And I know those two topics are relevant to most of us, but especially to you and your family over the last year with all the changes in your lives. So I thought it would be fun to just have conversations with other women. And yeah, I thought I'd start with you. And you were so nice, and I didn't even give you any preparation, and you just showed up. And here we are across many hours time difference, and our internet has been horrible lately. So we have like 3 different backups ready. So we'll see, and the power and everything. So you just never know what's going to happen on my end. But
Great.
yeah, thanks
It's an
for doing.
adventure.
And okay, so I have to introduce you to people who maybe don't know you. So Shawna and I have been friends for probably at least 10 years. 10 years? 10
Yep.
years. And we've been through a lot of transitions together and raising babies that are now practically prepubescent. I don't know. And
They're getting,
yeah, they're getting older, which means we're getting older, which means we're like midlife, which I don't really like to think about, but we probably are. And yeah, we've done ministry together for many years and walked a lot of kilometers together on many trails, dragging lots of children that are interrupting. And yes, we have a very special friendship, and I miss you across the distance. But
I
yes,
miss you too.
I know it's so hard. But I thought, okay, just to jump in, Shawna, I thought maybe you could tell us. I was trying to think of a question to ask you that I wouldn't know the answer to, but I think I know the answer. But tell everybody maybe 2 things that you love to do, because that will tell us a bit about you, and 2 things that you love about your family, like Jordan and the kids. Like, what are some things about your family that are unique or that you love about your family?
Well, at least you started with easy
Yeah,
questions.
exactly.
So
Easy
thanks.
questions.
I appreciate that. Okay, 2 things I love to do. First off, gardening
Yes, I knew
is the
it.
number one.
There's
I've
even
already
green
been over.
things behind you, which just proves that you
Yeah,
are a
well,
gardener.
indoor plants not so much.
Okay.
This is the only one that's alive still.
Oh, that's pretty good.
But yeah, outside this is the best time of year because everything's
What's growing right
pushing right
now
here.
for you?
Oh, what's growing right now? Garlic is growing right now.
Ooh,
And the greenhouse is full of the tomatoes and zucchinis just ready to get put in the ground. And then seeds are in mostly, so just waiting for them to
nice.
come. Yeah, the beets are up, and yeah, just waiting. So yeah, we're trying some new things this year. We're gonna try corn. We haven't done that before, and
Sweet.
leeks. So yeah, it's just an adventure. And another thing I love, I actually do love cooking because I like
Hmm.
eating, and and mostly that has a caveat that I like to cook when I'm like relaxed, so
Yeah.
not
Well, and you like
weekday.
serving others, right? Like you love hospitality. So I think
I
cooking
love
comes
cooking.
into play with that because you like hosting
Yes,
people. Yeah.
I like feeding people good food,
Hmm.
hearty food, healthy food, not so healthy food, but
Food from your
homemade. Yeah,
garden. It's like
yeah,
a whole
yeah,
system.
yeah. I
Cool.
like the fresh and healthy, but I also like the good old comfort food. So yeah.
Nice.
And things that I appreciate or love about my family. Well, Jordan, you know this, but my husband is like extremely involved as a like he has just so much energy.
Mm.
So I love that he if it was like me parenting with by myself or with someone else, like I just don't think that um it would be as fun because he just brings a lot of
Mm.
fun
He's
with his
even with the
energy.
kids skiing today, right? Being the fun
Yeah,
dad
he
that
took
he
the
is.
kids skiing today,
Yeah.
and yeah, well, it gives me some space to get some things done and
Hmm.
also just kind of rest and recuperate from the week. So yeah, I just so appreciate him. He's awesome. Just he leans in on all the arenas of life to help, and yeah, really appreciate that. And then another thing, I love that my kids love their stuffed animals. And they love snuggling them. I know I actually don't personally love stuffed animals. I never did. I wasn't an attached person. I thought,
Mm.
why do people have so many stuffed animals? This is just clutter. And but my kids are so attached, and even like our 10-year-old, he like got a new stuffed animal yesterday because of the birthday party, and he a socially distanced birthday party. Don't worry, and he
Oh, we
has been
missed it.
walking around with it, and he named it Snuggly. And I'm gonna be sad the day that he outgrows
Oh.
that is okay. Like
Have
I just
you?
hope that he never cares what other people think and just walks around with that little dog on his shoulder. Like it's just adorable. I love that
I
they
hope you
like
take
love
a
on their.
picture of them or something and record that that's what his name was for him, just to
I
remember
know.
that.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
it's like the cutest thing.
I know.
Yeah. So I
That's
love that because it's like that tender hearted
mm,
side then. they can be like so rough and tumble, but then they'll all like get their stuffies and snuggle. And
that's so
it's
cool.
awesome.
That's super cool. And you have a very creative family in general and love to read, and they love to do lots of fun things. So
yeah, we love reading. We love being outside.
The library. Yeah. Oh, the library. Yes, I miss the library.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I did know some of those things, although I didn't know the stuffy thing. So there you go. A big change that has happened for your family is that you have added to your family this last year through adoption. And I think as a lot of adoption stories go, there's a lot of waiting in the process. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit into how much of this journey required waiting on God for you, and just what some of the hardest seasons have been in the process. Now, I didn't brief you, so you just have to do this on the fly. But yeah, what have been the hardest parts of those seasons of waiting on God?
Oh, man. Yeah, I mean, so from the day that we applied until the day she came home was about 3 years, which in the adoption world is not that long, actually. It was a local adoption through the Ministry of Children and Family, so not international. Public, not private. And so that just meant that there was no guarantees. I mean, there's never any guarantees in adoption. I would say probably the first year wasn't as hard because we knew that was just paperwork and home study and education. And once that home study was done, the education was done, and it was, I think, February 2019, we were like, okay, now what? And, we had a naive new social worker tell us that it could be any time. And so I think that was probably the hardest time because it wasn't soon. And she had kind of implied that, and I got my hopes up. And in hindsight, like looking back, I'm glad that we had the extra time to grow as a family, just as people before Brooklyn joined our family.
Yeah.
So it's not a bad thing, but in the midst of it, it was difficult because we put a lot of pieces of our life on hold in the expectation that we were preparing for when we needed to kind of pull back from ministry or pull back from some of our obligations and commitments. And then when you have nothing to show for it, it's a really awkward time because you've kind of put everything out there, told people, and then you're just sitting and waiting. And a lot of times I'd be like, okay, God, like we put everything on hold. We're ready. And, but he knew better. And I think especially COVID. So last March, when things kind of started shutting down, we knew at that point we had already been preliminarily matched, and we were just, there was a lot of red tape with this adoption and various reasons I won't get into. And every single part of that was so hard because we had her picture, we had the description, we'd seen videos, we knew in our heart this was the child that God was going to bring into our home, but we just didn't know when. And after delay, you start to feel like, is this going to fall through? And that was the worst. That was the worst time because we couldn't even tell our kids, the other three, because we didn't want them to experience disappointment if something got delayed again or if it fell through. And so,
so just a lot of highs and lows and lots of uncertainty, really. Yeah,
just a lot of prayer and a lot of, I just remember that the song Take Courage, it's all about how God's like with you in the waiting. And I swear we just had that on repeat in our house because for Jordan and I, like it was like our anthem, and the kids didn't know why it was always on, but it was just this constant, every time we would get news, it would be bad. And you're like, okay, Lord, like we're still just moving forward. We're still trusting. We're still preparing the space. We're still going to do all the things. We're still pulled back from our commitments. I mean, COVID made that easier because everything shut down. And then we had a really beautiful summer though with the other three kids. And I think weathering the lockdown with them, if she had already been here, it would have been really probably not very healthy actually for them. And so actually that partly a blessing was that she came partway through the first, half of the school year. And so they were in school and it allowed us to have time with them at school instead of everyone just home
like
all the time.
Gradual entry kind of in a way.
I like,
So
feel like I'm not answering your whole question, but I can't remember what the other part was.
no, that's okay. I would just it's hard because you're at a different vantage point now, right? She's at home with you now.
Yeah.
So it's hard to reflect back sometimes to be, you didn't know how it was going to turn out. But when you're in the middle of it, when you're in the dark place of waiting, which is what I've written this book about, right? Which is waiting on God in those
Mhm.
dark places, in that awkward space where you don't know when it's going to end. It's like, how did you sort of preach to yourself to take courage? Like what helped you guys in that season of waiting? Did you find?
Yeah. A few things. I think Jordan and I had both kind of been on a journey through um, like looking at what are our narratives about God,
Mm,
like who he is. And kind of taking some of the thoughts that come when you're in your dark moment, like
mm,
maybe God didn't really call us to this,
right,
or
right.
those doubts, and just like having to really just bring them and talk about them with each
Mm,
other, not in isolation, but actually like
hmm,
saying it out loud. Like, what if I'm not actually equipped? What if I'm not actually
right.
able? What if I'm not capable? And then going back to what do we know to be true about God is
Mm,
that he does give us strength, and it's not us on our own. And
hmm,
especially that last, I don't know, the last 2 months during the transition was really rough. It was so rough. And
I
then
remember.
bringing her home finally, and then you're waiting for attachment. We're still in that. We're
Yeah.
still in that waiting, and that's really hard. And
Mm-hmm.
so continually having to go back to that, like, no, we are called and capable.
Mm,
Just the same things we would want to tell our children,
mm,
like, you are responsible for what you take on. So we are responsible for her, but you're called and capable, and God equips you. Um, and just going, even things like, God doesn't just punish evil people and bless good people. Like,
mm,
that's false. And so even when you're doing the right thing, you can go through hard times, and you can
totally.
still have
Yeah.
seasons of suffering. And that has been the waiting part, and some of the pieces of after she came home have been so hard.
Yeah,
Like,
we'll get
we
to
don't
that. I'm
sleep.
going to talk about that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. It
Yeah, but
doesn't
I
really
think that
end.
the communication was really important. Like, not
Mm,
letting those things just kind of happen up
mm,
here and then laying awake at night, but then the next morning actually saying, like, here's what kept me up last night. I'm worrying about this,
mm,
or this is, I know this is false, but I need you to, like, pray with me about it, talk to me about it, look at scripture with me,
yeah.
whatever, encouraging each other with through the faith, and friends like you and others that just like
Mm,
kept checking in,
mm,
and praying and praying and praying
mm.
and knowing we were prayed for. That was
So some of the
phenomenal.
blessings that you kind of found in the waiting was some of the connection that you probably had with Jordan, right? Like that you were walking this together, and that probably brought more
Yeah,
vulnerability.
yeah.
And then just like I don't know, just maybe do you feel like you've grown in your faith in some way? Like just that repeated pattern of having to bring those doubts to the Lord, has that sort of set you up in a different way for this next season that you've had with her being at home, do you think? Or
Yeah. I
yeah,
think that we both grew a lot actually in those 3 years.
yeah.
We are not the same people that we were 3 years
Oh,
ago
that's so
when we
cool.
applied.
So cool that God
And
can still use
we were
that.
not ready then. I think we
Huh.
thought like,
You thought,
oh, we're ready to have a fourth kid. But it's not about the number of kids.
yeah.
It was about the way our entire life was going to change.
Okay,
We
well,
weren't
let's
ready for
get to that because that's really the other thing that I want to talk about is like, I know that you have had some unique challenges with Brooklyn coming home. She has some physical challenges, and tell me a little bit about what are some of the daily struggles that you face, if whatever you feel comfortable to share. Just because I just especially think that so many women who are mothers, and just women in general, we have these aspects of our life that require long suffering and continued
it.
perseverance and continued dependence on the Lord. And like, these things don't maybe change. Like these are things that we are always going to have to keep walking through. And so, yeah, with a child that has some physical challenges, that's the reality now for you guys. So maybe just speak to like, what are some of the daily challenges that you found, and how are you managing? Like I know it's still daily challenges, right? So like, what's
Yeah.
that endurance game like for you right now, and how is the Lord meeting you in it?
Okay, the daily challenges.
Yeah.
Well, so Brooklyn has complex medical needs,
Mm,
but she also has, the trauma and loss piece coming
mm,
in. So some of the daily challenges have to do with just my own, like how I react to her. So the daily
mm,
challenge of just responding in love and patience and grace because of all she's been through when she's doing things that if any of my other children were to do those things, right, we would feel like we have the relationship to be able to say very firmly, to come at those and still know that the relationship's okay.
Right.
But you won't have that in adoption. And so that's a huge challenge personally, especially because one of the side effects of her medical conditions is she doesn't sleep very much. So exhaustion and unpredictability, like every day is different. Some nights she will sleep 8 hours. Some nights she'll sleep 4. Some nights she is up all the night and then she falls asleep at 6 a.m. Well, we have to get ready for school. And then some nights she's asleep from 9 till 2 a.m. And then she's been up for, 6 hours before it's time to go to school. And then having to make those choices. Do I send her? Do I keep her home? That's really challenging. She really struggles with transitions. And our home is just so, so, so different than her foster home was. So she's just getting used to, we eat at a table. We eat all together. We try new foods, right? There's things where you're trying to be sensitive to, okay, she hasn't experienced this before, but also, getting to the dinner table is extremely hard. Stopping whatever she's doing, even if it's just she's in the washroom and now it's time for dinner, that's hard. So it makes mealtime stressful.
Yeah.
Especially when I know you probably had this where you've worked really hard, you've made this beautiful meal. By the time you get it, it's cold. Everyone's complained about it. Those just so dealing with those frustrations of just okay, this isn't what I signed up for. This, but it is. It is. So that's hard because you do know those things going in. It's not going to be like a cakewalk. Yeah. So, yeah, but I'd say the sleep and the transitioning her and her getting used to that. Sometimes we have to go in the car to take someone somewhere. And you're not going to want to do that. And then dealing with the meltdowns are just enormous. The meltdowns are huge.
So how do you see the Lord's grace meeting you in that? I know, right? We have good days, we have bad days, we have days that we're relying on him and days that we're not, and days that we come fresh to the challenges that we have and days that we don't come fresh. What are the things that maybe the Lord is what are the graces in it right now for you? Right now, because I know even maybe even last night you didn't sleep. I don't know.
Actually, last night I was not on the monitor, so I did sleep last night. So I feel okay today. But I think you said some days you come fresh, some days you don't. That it can be physical, but it can also be spiritual. So the days where I'm well rested, but I'm not actually leaning on God can be just as bad as the days where I'm sleep deprived.
Interesting. Yeah.
Because I'm actually not coming at it from the right place. So one thing that's been really big is, and Jordan's been very supportive of this, is that I go walking pretty much every day. And I'm using that time to just be with the Lord, listen maybe to a little bit of an audiobook, listen to some worship music, pray, take off the headphones, just listen to the birds chirping and breathe. And, one thing that our friend Laura had taught me a little while ago was just about breathing prayer, breathing in and breathing out and actually having a bit of a repetitive phrase. So, breathing in God's love, breathing out God's love to my children, breathing
really
in
good.
God's peace, breathing out God's peace. And when I come home, I can enter the house and it's total chaos as usual. Or sometimes it's not, but usually it's chaos. And then I'm finding that is huge because I am not in a good space when I haven't had any time to do that. And that's really hard as moms. Carving out. Yeah. There's seasons where that's impossible. Yeah. Where it's totally. I wish I could. That sounds really great, but I actually physically can't do that. Or maybe you don't have a supportive spouse who's saying, yes, go, I'll watch all the kids. And that's again why Jordan and his energy having 4 kids is great, because if it was someone who didn't want to on as soon as they get home from work, that would be really challenging. And then it goes the other way too. I need to allow him to also pull back and spend time with the Lord. And right now, because of the sleep, waking up early is not really a great option for us.
Yeah, for sure. You've had to sort of readjust your whole schedule, right? In a lot of ways, the patterns and habits you would have had to thrive before have had to adjust and change with adding Brooklyn, right? So, well, and one thing I've always admired about you, Shawna, I know, especially in the last couple of years, getting into the Word has been a really big passion of yours. And I know you've had really great support with that, with the precepts, Bible studies. Maybe speak to that or some other things that you've found that have just sort of helped you stay in the Word, what motivated you joining precepts and what motivates you to keep pressing into the Word. How do you keep, I actually, this is one thing I really want to talk about too, to women, because I do think that, your devotional life really changes a lot through seasons of life. And I know like in the early years, you have all this wonderful time to spend with the Lord, and you just, like you journal and you do all these things, and then like you have children, and there's just these ups and downs in our devotional life. And I think sometimes the ways that we used to approach God, it's not that they don't work anymore, but they're not really working for us anymore. Like we have to find new ways to like be able to meet with God. And like you just said, walking, like I think that's been huge for me too. Like sometimes you need something different to just get you in a different space, and maybe it's not the same thing anymore. It's not just sitting with a journal like while kids are in the other room, like sometimes we need a different. So maybe just speak to like what have you found that's worked in this season of your life to connect with the Lord, and what are some habits and stuff that you've found that's helpful for you?
I think, the having an actual Bible study that I'm attending, even if it's virtually. So I think I want to say it's been about 7 years that I've been doing inductive Bible study, and Precept's
Has
just
it been
one.
that long?
Yeah, because I think it
Wow.
was a baby when I started. Yeah. And
Amazing.
and that was actually like, so I had 2 kids at that point, and I was just like desperate to be like, I want something more. And I actually want to know what I believe. And even though I was raised in a Christian home and had a lot of background foundational knowledge, I just wanted to be able to discover truth for myself, and not just know it from a pastor, or even a devotional book, right? So inductive helped me to be able to peel back the layers of scripture, comparing it against other scripture, and kind of learn the tools to be able to then, when I am reading, know how to ask good questions of the text. And so I mean, again, like Precept's just one of many inductive studies, but I do recommend it because there's something about having a formal study that is a bit different than just reading scripture. A daily reading is amazing and so helpful, right? Because we're marinating in truth. And so the outflow of that is that we remember it throughout the day, it impacts us, and it's really great. The formal study piece, having a deadline for me of having that weekly, I have from Tuesday to next Tuesday, this is the amount of studying I need to do. These are the questions. And actually having something I'm working on, it felt like it fueled my mind and my spirit. Because often in motherhood, I find like there's all these mundane things we have to do all the time. And they're the same. Unload the dishwasher, start the laundry, unload the dishwasher. And it's just over and over and over. And it can feel a bit like I'm not being challenged in ways that I'd like to be challenged. Like I'm being challenged in patience and all the other things, but I'm not being challenged. My mind wanted more. And so, some people go back to school or do other things, but this was something where, and I found that the accountability of having that weekly check-in with other women, and even just going over it and receiving some teaching around that topic. Like this last year we did Daniel in the fall, and then we did 2 Peter in the winter, and we're currently on a break, and I miss it. I really miss it because it was so good. And you feel like when you do uncover truth, and you're like, you have these aha moments, even when you're in scripture that you've read like hundreds of times maybe in your life or heard preached on, it's really, you feel like I'm very empowered to be like, this is the truth I know, and this is the truth that I can, put my whole weight on, and it's going to carry me when I'm really, really weak. And when I'm strong, it's going to carry me all the time. Right. But I just feel weak a lot lately.
Yeah.
So having that. And then I found the more I do it, the more that in a new study, it'll remind me of things I've learned from other ones. And you really just see that Genesis to Revelations, it's one story, and it's got all these little parts, but it all is tied together. And it can feel very fragmented when, I don't know, in the way I was raised, like we read things in isolation and studied things in isolation, even in sermon series. And so there wasn't a lot of crossover. And it was still good and quality teaching, but now I feel like I have a better overview of what the big picture is. And and even just in my parenting, when I'm not in scripture, like I find myself really just kind of quick to react, and not really tapping into, God's heart for me, that I get to share then that heart with my children. And I am displaying or not displaying God's love and grace to my kids. So it's a high kind of calling, and it can feel kind of hard actually to be like, oh my goodness, like I don't want to teach my kids some bad, narrative about who God is because I'm messing up. And so maybe that even just means restoring relationship through apology, or talking to them openly about that, this, I sinned and I messed up, and I'm so thankful that God forgives me, and will you forgive me too? And, those kinds of things. I'm not as quick to do that when I haven't been in the Word. So
yeah. So that's been super helpful, I think, in general, having that habit already in place, even coming into this kind of season. Hey, like with all the changes and the upheaval.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And
like
I
was already
thought
there.
maybe I wouldn't be able to do that commitment anymore. And then it was online, and I was like, oh my goodness,
that's actually helpful.
I can still do that. So that was a big blessing. It was like, I missed being with the women in person, and getting out of the house. But I was so thankful that I could still access a community that all has the same goal, just to know Christ better and grow in Him, and apply the truth, not just know it in our head, but actually apply it to our lives.
So maybe like lastly, just like what encouragement would you give to women who are maybe have a kid that has some chronic issues that just are, just the daily grind of just trying to like keep meeting their child's needs, and how draining and difficult it is, like either to that person or to maybe somebody who would be listening that is waiting on God for that child to come home, or, in a season where, things are out of your control. Like if you could just give any piece of encouragement, what would it be?
Yeah. Well, one thing a lot of people had encouraged us with was, everyone always says like, okay, take care of yourself. You need to take care of yourself, or you're not good to anybody else. And it is really true. And that might look like carving out time with the Lord. Most definitely will look like that, actually. Or maybe getting exercise, or having friends that you're still in contact with, even if social distancing and other things makes it difficult. And then being able to, really have a good sense of like, God's got me, and he does have you, even when it feels like he doesn't. He does have you. And then I am actually called to this. And the waiting piece, I mean, that is hard. I would say, two things, one for waiting and one for after you're done waiting and you're dealing with the hard days.
A new set of challenges.
For the waiting period, I would say is make the most of the waiting. So it's a great chance for like growing and learning while you're waiting, and you're not going to have the same amount of time. And so that sounds maybe not super encouraging, but I'm glad that we did do a lot of the things we did while we were waiting.
Yeah.
And then it allowed us to not have regrets later. I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have done that, because now we can't.
Well, and what I hear when you're saying that too, is just the reality that like, this is part of your life and this is part of your story, but there's also the person of you underneath that's still there, right? Like, and that's still part of the story. And like, that's not all of who you are. And you still need to continue growing as a person, even while this like side story is happening, right? Yeah. You're waiting for this adoption to come through, but like, I'm still here, and my spouse is still here, and these children are still here, and I still have growing to do. And like, that deserves attention too, right? Like, cause I think sometimes we get stuck.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, sometimes we get stuck, right? Cause we're like stuck in this sort of like paralysis feeling of like, well, I can't really do anything else until this comes through, when actually like there's a lot of things we can do when we're in the waiting.
Yeah. And I think it's the same even if you're single and you're waiting on if you're someday going to meet someone.
Yeah. Waiting on many things in this life. We do wait on many.
Yeah. We do so much waiting. And if that's our focus is the someday, we're really missing out on right now and what God has for us. And he still has ways that he wants to use us and build into us and be with us when we're in the waiting. And so, and then after, I would say, document your wins.
You told me about this, that you've been doing this.
Yeah. I know a lot of people like gratitude journal or this or that. I just am not a journaler. The writing, taking the time to write something down. It's just not, I move too fast usually, and trying really hard not to slow down and actually do that. But that is one thing that's been really helpful, is just writing down, hey, today she tried to bite a clam chowder. That's a win. Even if she didn't like it, or today she fell asleep, within 2.5 hours, and we were able to watch a movie or hang out in the evening. That's a win. Even something like today she did her own zipper. I mean, really, it can be like something really small. Like she came to the table one time without a fight.
I think that's really great advice. I think that's great advice for people with kids with challenges too, right? In general, just like that, that to celebrate the small things, because sometimes that's kind of all you had in that day was just a few small things, but that's also reason to be thankful. Yeah.
And someone, a friend of ours, Joel, had told me I was dealing with a really challenging class because I teach. Not currently, I'm on a break, but when I was teaching, I was having a really challenging time. And I remember him telling me, like, just pour on the positivity. Like, you find the thing, and it takes work to find the thing you're doing right.
That's so good.
But you just celebrate that, and you just celebrate that, and you just celebrate that, and you just keep on celebrating until the kid believes what you're saying about them. And I think that's, even if our documentation of the things she does is just for us to be able to look back and see all of these 20 cool things that are little tiny steps, because adoption and any child with special needs, it's a marathon, and it's you're never really going to arrive. Yeah. So if you don't see the good in it, then it's even just a few months in, I'm like, I am so glad we're doing this. Yeah. And pouring on when she does do that thing, being able to say to her, like, high five. Oh my gosh, I'm so thankful that you did that. Like, look, you're growing. Look, you're learning so much. She wrote her name recently. I don't know if I told you this.
No, that's awesome.
When we met her, she couldn't hold a pen.
It's amazing.
So she didn't have the grip strength to hold a pen. So this is, to me, is like huge. Yeah. And even though on paper it just says she wrote her name, I know what that means. Totally. And that is evidence that, even though it can feel like she's not growing. She's just throwing tantrums all the time, and she's not sleeping. And but there's so much good in there.
That's really good. That's really good. I think too, like, do you find, like, what has that taught you about just showing grace to yourself? Like, I mean, obviously through all of this, I mean, we lose it too, right? We lose our cool constant, like, we're still growing humans, and we have our own stresses and stuff that kids don't understand. And like, it's like, how are you showing grace to yourself in this season? 'Cause I know that must be hard also. Yeah. Well, I actually have been thinking a lot this week about how to model resiliency to my kids, and in the season of pandemic forever. Pandemic forever. Yes. And we have to talk about that. I have been thinking about how I talk to myself, because their self-talk is sometimes very negative. I can't, or, those things. And, they mess up again, and I'm frustrated at what they've done for the 25th time. Yep. But to be able to say to them, yeah, you know what, you made a mistake, but you're growing and you're learning. And then turning that around and saying that to myself, blew up with the kids, and I'm not proud of it, and I need to make it right, but I am growing, and I do it less than I used to. And just because if we don't have grace with ourselves, like, can we really have true grace for others? If we don't forgive ourselves, can we really know how to forgive others? Like, I think it does start today with us. Yeah. So, Thanks, and I would encourage, and this is like a shameless plug, but I do encourage those who are believers and struggling in parenting. I have been really leaning on people who just know and have been there, and connected families. We really appreciate their wisdom for parenting, and listen to their podcasts and have read some of what they've written, and just that, like, we're not alone. There's resources that can help us when we're in those dark seasons and we're just like floundering. And that, like, having that encouragement, even if it's just a 20-minute podcast and you're walking or driving, I always walk away very much like just having drawn attention to it in my mind and heart, and it gives me new, renewed, energy to do the work that it takes. Really, it is work. I so appreciate that you guys are so intentional about that. I think the fueling yourself with like intentionally, like, recognizing that I need some input in this area, and actually, like, intentionally building time to, like, fuel yourself in that way. I think we're not always good at, sometimes we kind of just get into the rut of, like, just kind of accidental living in general. I feel like,
accidental living, I like that.
Like, just That's not so taking any intention, like, nothing. I guess that I've always learned that, like, or recently learned, like, without intentionality, like, nothing changes, right? Like, unless you're actually intentional about
Yeah.
You know, saying that we value this enough that I'm going to take time to do this, then otherwise you won't. You just don't. Your time just gets taken, right? Like time just goes away.
Yeah.
Like it just flies. And you don't, you know.
And even if your kids don't notice that you're growing because it's
Hmm.
really small and incremental, they're not the one really. I mean,
Hmm.
they're not going to be the measure of, oh, no, they're not affirming me that I
Hmm.
snap so much less at them. Like that is not a good measure. But
Hmm.
being able to be like, God knows my heart, and
Hmm.
I know that I am striving to, bring this to Him, to
Hmm.
lay down the pieces that are not healthy and pick up new tools and healthy ways of addressing my kids or interacting with them or parenting or whatever it is, or
Hmm.
even if it's just like the way I spend my time. I know that I'm spending it in ways that are helping me.
So
They
good,
don't
Sean.
know that I'm doing all this work in the background, but over time, when they're adults, I hope they will look back
Hmm.
and because I did the work, the rest of the story from now on
Hmm.
gets to be healthier for them,
Mm, that's
right?
so good. Man, now I do need to listen to that podcast more. Okay,
I
well,
do really appreciate
I
it.
it's awesome. You're sharing some good resources. I think that's the benefit of things like this. Is like sharing resources with each other, like what's helping, you know? We're all in the same boat. But thank
Yeah.
you for taking some time. I love that
Yeah,
other people
thanks
get to
for,
hear.
I'm so honored.
I like other people get to hear your story. I just think that we learn so much from each other's stories, and without being able to be present with so many people, like I think it's just helpful to like lean in and hear how other women are doing and what unique challenges are shaping them in their life and how the Lord is using them to grow them. So thank you.